Om Prithvi Shantirantarikshagam Shantir Dyav Shantir Disha Shantiravantara Disha Shantiragni Shantir Vayu Shantiraditya Shantish Chandrama Shantir Nakshatrani Shantirapa Shantiroshadaya Shantir Vanaspataya Shantir Gau Shantiraja Shantirashva Shantir Purusha Shantir Brahma Shantir Brahmana Shantir Shantireva Shanti Shantir me Astu Shantihi. May there be peace on earth and in the sky. May there be peace in the water and in all directions. May there be peace in the plants, in the trees, and in animals. May there be peace in the hearts of all beings. May there be peace in everyone and in everything. Sarvetra sukhinas santu, sarve santu niramayaha, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kaschit dukkha bhag bhavet, sarvastaratu durgani, sarvo bhadrani pashyatu, Sarvas sadbuddhimapnotu, sarvas sarvatra nandatu. May all be happy and healthy. May all see what is good, and may no one experience misery. May all overcome their obstacles and acquire good tendencies. May people everywhere find joy and fulfillment. Let us now spend some time touching the center of peace and joy in our hearts. A good way to begin the practice is to withdraw the scattered energies of the mind and bring them to rest on one point. That point can be our own breathing. Let us therefore practice breathing with awareness. As we breathe in, let us visualize that our body and mind are being filled with love, strength, and compassion. And as we breathe out, let us release all the stress, anxiety, and exhaustion in the body and mind. Let us practice this way for a while. Let us now turn our attention to the region of our heart. Although God is present everywhere and in everyone, the divine presence can be felt most clearly in our own hearts. We can meditate in any way we have been taught. To remain focused, we can take the help of a short mental prayer or a mantra or a divine name. Let us now spend some time dwelling on the presence of God in our hearts. Om Asato Ma Satkamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya Aviravir Mayeti Rudrayatte Takshinam Mukham Tena Mam Pahi Nityam. May the Divine lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May the Divine Consciousness fill our hearts and protect us. So we continue from where we left off last week with the discussion on this tangible body that we have. That's the outermost layer of the three layers that are being discussed. The outermost layer is called the gross body, the Sthula Sharira. Beyond that is the subtle body called the Sukshma Sharira. And the innermost covering is called the causal body, the Karana Sharira. So presently we have been studying this outermost layer. The body is something that we have been living with right from the time we were born. In fact, one way of defining birth means an acquisition of the body. From the Vedantic perspective, the subtle body and the causal body, and we will see what they are, a discussion will follow, they were already there even before we were born. So what we call birth really means an additional layer over the two layers that we are already born with. And this additional layer that we acquire is this visible body that we have. So every breath we take, every step we take, our body is involved. What this section helps us do is look at the body from a perspective we may not have seen before, or we may not have given too much attention to. So let's read verse 85. Moha eva mahamrutyuhu mumukshor vapuradishu moho vinirchito yena samukti padamarhati. To a spiritual seeker, identifying with things like the body is dire death. Only one who has conquered the force of identification is fit for the state of freedom. The force of identification, the Sanskrit word that best represents that idea, is called moha. So what is this force of identification? What does identifying with something mean? And what it means is that my own real self, the real me, somehow gets limited, somehow gets distorted, and a new mine is created. The real me, the true self, doesn't possess anything. So there is no mine connected with the real I. But this distorted I that we seem to acquire comes with a mine, I and mine. So therefore, we speak about two kinds of identifications. The primary identification as I and the secondary identification as mine. And we will see that whatever we identify with, whoever we identify with, it limits us. as simple a thing as if you go to watch, say, a baseball game. How many people in that ballpark are truly neutral? I think probably very few, if any. Most of the time, we are identified with one of the two teams that are playing. And that identification, can be extremely strong. What that identification does, wonderful as that identification is, it ties us up with the fortunes of that team with which we are identified. So the Red Sox fans, if I'm identified with the Red Sox, when the Sox win, that's my victory. I'm overjoyed. I do everything. If the Sox lose, I'm sad. I could be even angry. All kinds of negativity then fills my heart. So my reaction then get completely tied to the fortune or misfortune of the team that I'm identified with. If I'm not identified with any team, if at all, if such a thing is possible, actually you can enjoy the game better, I would imagine. Because then you would be looking at merely the excellence of the game being played. You will be able to appreciate the beautiful ways the game can be played, the efficiencies, the ways that can simply draw our admiration, irrespective of which team that player belongs to. We can truly enjoy the game fully. But if you're tied to one team, we can't. Now, why am I saying all this? Because something similar to that has happened in our life, in our real life as well. So we have gotten identified with this body. So the fortune or misfortune of the body becomes my fortune or misfortune. If the body is hurt, I am hurt. If the body is sick, I am sick. If the body is healthy and fit and ready, I am happy. So whatever happens to the body happens to me. And that's what identification does. And that is why the word that is used in this verse, calling it dire death, the word Sanskrit word is Mahamrityu. Mrityu means death. Mahamrityu means it's a death on a grand scale, if you like, a dire death. Why is it a dire death? Because it's even worse than physical death. Physical death, think about it this way. From a larger perspective, physical death is not really as big a deal as it might appear to us. Right now, because all of our identification is centered around this visible body. And death means this visible body goes away. So it looks like a big deal. But if we look deeper, if we become aware that in my personality, there is the subtle body, there is the causal body, and of course there is the Atman, and there is this outermost visible body. So death really means just this outer layer goes away. A lot remains. So death doesn't mean going into nothingness. So a physical death is not as big a deal, but getting identified with the body, that identification produces deep samskara, deep impression in the mind, which survives death, which remains after death, which is what really continues in the next life. So when a person dies and acquires another body, how does that person get identified with that body? Because the samskara of identifying with a body already existed in that mind, which is a part of the subtle body. And therefore, identification takes away our neutrality. Although this is not a part of what we are discussing, just as a side note, in order to bring peace among people who are fighting or quarreling, whether it's at the level among your friends or in a family or even at the international level, we know there's a lot of conflicts going on. If peace has to be brought, the one who is negotiating that peace has to be seen as a neutral person. So if a person who is trying to bring peace seems identified with one side or the other, then you cannot be acceptable fully to both the sides. Now sometimes, of course, there could be a lot of other pressures that can be brought about, and one or the other side may be forced to accept someone as a negotiator. But we know that that kind of peace is very fragile. There's still a lot of suspicion, anger remaining. And this can happen, as I said, not only at the international level, but even at the interpersonal level. The Atman is completely neutral. It's not identified with anyone and anything. But this identification is what takes away our neutrality. And that is why it is called a dire death. And I said that once we get identified with something other than who we really are, then along with this new I, the ego that he generated, a secondary identification created in the form of mine. Now what that mine is described in the next verse, 86. Moham jahi mahamrutyum dehadara sutadishu yam jitva munayo yanti tadvishnov paramam padam. Give up the deadly identification with the body, the spouse, the children, etc., conquering which spiritual seekers reach the all-pervading Supreme Being. Give up this deadly identification. The same phrase is used here as in the earlier verse called Mahamrityu. And what is this mind that is created? The mind that is associated not only with the body, but with the people around us, with my family, my friends, my children, etc., etc., will include my sporting team, my country, and so on. You can just add, just find out how many things and places and objects there are which we use along with the possessive pronoun mine or my. Now sometimes this kind of a statement can get misunderstood, which is to say, oh, shouldn't I love these people who are my own? Shouldn't I love my family? Shouldn't I love my children, my spouse, my friends? Is it wrong to love my sporting team? Is it bad to love my country? That's not what is being said here. What is being said is, stop identifying with them. In fact, and this is a little bit counterintuitive, true love is possible only when we don't identify. Because identification leads to attachment, not love. And so the less we identify, the more we can love. I know this doesn't appear very logical, but that's how it is. It takes a lot of reflection to understand the distinction between attachment and love. The more the attachment goes away, the greater the love that fills our heart. Because only when we are able to remove that sense of mine, then, as this verse points out, spiritual seekers reach the all-pervading Supreme Being. Look at it's a beautiful phrase here, all-pervading. The word Vishnu, often identified with the deity Vishnu, the literally really means all-pervading. When my consciousness gets limited to a few people, to a few places, to a few things, then I've gotten identified with it. When I'm not identified with anything specific, I become all-pervading. And real joy, real freedom, real peace is possible only in this eternal, all-pervading consciousness. Everything that is limited in whatever way might seem to produce some amount of joy, but it comes with 10 times the amount of suffering. The only bliss that we can get is when we are able to not identify with anything specific, but just identify with our true self, which is really eternal. That's the idea. Love, so keep this a very important conclusion of Vedanta in mind, that love leads to freedom. The seed of love is in the heart of all of us. What prevents that seed from sprouting as a beautiful plant, a beautiful flower, is this attachment. So the more the attachment goes away, the greater the love that comes out. It's love that is freeing. It is love that is liberating. Verse 87. Tvang mamsa rudhirasnayu medo majjasthi sankulam purnam mutra purishabhyam sthulam nindyamidam vapuhu. Vapu means the body. This body is disgusting, consisting as it does of the skin, flesh, blood, arteries and veins, fat, marrow and bones, and is filled with urine and feces. Looking upon the body in this way, it's very difficult to not feel a sense of disgust. Because sometimes people do say beauty is skin deep. From outward, it just looks great. But that's why not all people can withstand the sight once the body is cut open. In fact, some of you may have seen that exhibition, which kind of goes from place to place. It came, I think, in the last few years, a couple of times in Boston as well, called Body Worlds. It's fascinating. It's both. It's both fascinating and disgusting in some ways. The word for disgusting that is in this verse is called nindya. It's fascinating because there are so many millions of moving parts inside the body. And the general rule is the more the moving parts in any machine, the greater the probability of it breaking down. Because the more moving parts there is a greater probability of something going wrong somewhere. So considering the number of moving parts, both big and small, inside our body, it's quite a perfect machine. Yes, it breaks down, no doubt, now and then. But the fact that it lasts as long as it does, and in a fairly workable condition, is itself a miracle. So if someone doesn't believe in God, I sometimes like to say, I challenge any human being to manufacture a machine like this with so many moving parts, which will not break down more often. So, I know this is not a very logical argument, but that's how a devotee's mind would think. If anybody has created this body, only someone, a God-like figure, could have done that. So it's fascinating. Yes, we can. It's awe-inspiring. But also, when we see what's inside this body and how much of our time and energy is spent catering to the demands of this very perishable entity, we just feel, is it worth all that? Again, the goal here is not to say, don't take care of the body. The idea here is to point out, this is only a covering over who I am really. And yes, we need to take good care of the covering. The body and the mind are the only instruments we have. We need a body in a working condition. We need the mind in a working condition, because with body and mind, we will be able to do our spiritual practices. It's using the body and the mind in an intelligent way, in a wise way, that we can transcend the limitations of the body and mind. So the idea is not to ignore what the body is, but the idea is to remember always that that's not me. That's only an outermost layer. We don't need to be cautious to saying the clothes that I'm wearing are not me. We know, of course, they perform a useful function. We need them. But we never think this is me. Can we cultivate that kind of understanding with regard to our body as well? That is what these verses are trying to bring to our attention. Verse 88. Panchikritebhyo bhutebhyah sthulebhyah purvakarmana samutpannamidam sthulam bhoga yatanamatmanah avastha jagarastasya sthulartha anubhavo yataha. This body is one's receptacle of experience. It is the result of past karma and consists of tangible elements that result from panchikarana. Since the body generates experience of tangible objects, it is identified with the waking state. Receptacle of experience. Bhoga ayatanam. Bhogayatanam. Why is it a receptacle of experience? Because all physical experiences come through the body. All experiences. In order for me to see something, my eyes have to be open. So, unless this physical eye is open, I will be unable to take in all the sights. If I close my ears, these physical ears, even with a noise-cancelling phones, all the sounds are shut off. So, the physical body is an important doorway for all the sensory input that we get from the world around us. In fact, what we call the world is nothing but these sensory inputs, whether it's sight, sound, touch, smell, taste. Put all these together, that's really what the world is. So we see the vital role that the body plays in connecting us with the world. All of the experience comes to us through the body. That's why the body is one receptacle of experience. Why is it said that the body is the result of past karma? Not to go into too many details, but because we have discussed this several times before and we'll discuss this several times in the future as well. The body is a result of karma simply for this reason. Karma, work, leads to karma phala, the results of work. In experiential terms, the results are either joy or sorrow. If the work is good, if it's successful, it makes us happy. If the work is not good, if it's failure, it leads somehow to pain and suffering. Now, to experience either the joy or the pain, we need a body. Without the body, how am I going to have all the pleasures? Without the body, how can I have any of the suffering? And therefore, in order for me to experience the results of karma, I take birth. So the body can be seen as a necessity to experience the results of my karma. Now, just like every cause has an effect, so every karma has an effect as well. So all the karma that I have done, whose effects I have not yet experienced, and if I die before experiencing all the results of all the karma that I have done, then there is a lot of unexperienced karma results in my account. That is why I have to take birth again to do the unfinished business of experiencing my karma result. Which is why enlightenment is often spoken of in terms of burning of all karma. The Gita says the fire of knowledge burns all the karma. Why is burning the karma necessary? Because then there is no more unexperienced results of karma remaining, because all the karma is burnt off. And therefore there is no rebirth, no further identification, no further pain, and I can be happy. And that is why the body is considered the result of past karma. How long will the body last? How do we define the lifespan of a person? What determines the lifespan of a person? Externally and superficially, we might say, well, the health. If the person is very healthy, the person will live for a long time. If the person is unhealthy, the person will not live. Or we could say just bad luck, because sometimes people die in accidents, car accidents, and so on, or a pandemic. So there are a bunch of reasons that can be given externally to say how and when life ends. They are not wrong, but is there a more subtle, a more hidden reason which determines how long a person will live? And that answer from the standpoint of karma is simply that as long as the karma that has given rise to this body is being worked out, or their results are being experienced, this body will last. Once that karma is exhausted, this body will die. It has nothing really to do with being healthy or not. Because we know, apparently healthy people die also. It has nothing to do with age. It's not just that old people will die one day. Well, old people will die one day, yes. But people die when they are young as well. So it's nothing to do with age, nothing to do with health. There is a deeper reality behind that. And that is simply how much karma has given rise to this body. To kind of give even a more sillier example, if you like, let's say, well, Hawaii is a great vacation spot, and lots of people go there. Now, just by looking at the person, there is no way to know how long any tourist is going to live in that place. There's no way to know. But we know that there are flights going there every day, there are flights departing every day. There are people who go, some people live there for 3 days, 5 days, 7 days, some people might live there for a month or 2 months. So what is it that determines how long people will stay? And among the many factors that are possible, one major factor is really what their budget is for that vacation. So if they started like, this is the money I'm going to spend during this vacation, that's how long they are going to be at that place. This is a little bit like that. Every one of us, when we are born, we already come with some karma budget, if you like. And unfortunately, we can't look into it and see how much karma we have. We don't know. We can't see it. We have no idea how much it is. But as long as that karma is still with us, we will live. And how do we spend that karma? With every joy and every pain that we experience in life, a little bit of that karma is being spent. So if you want to live long, try not to finish all your joys and sorrows at once. Space them out a little bit. I'm just joking, but that's the idea. And that's why it is said it is the result of past karma and consists of tangible elements that result from panchikarana. We touched upon this briefly earlier, that the first manifestation of the material particles is very subtle, extremely subtle. So the process by which these very subtle material particles become a little bit more tangible, that process is called panchikarana. So this body, which is tangible, is made up of atoms and molecules. But there are earlier, subtler manifestations of matter which eventually will become tangible. And so we know clearly everything is very subtle in the beginning and gradually becomes more and more tangible. So this body, therefore, is a result of tangible elements which have become gross from the process of panchikarana. And the last sentence is pretty obvious. Since the body generates experience of tangible objects, it is identified with the waking state. So when we are seeing tangible objects around us, we say we are awake. Now, one question can come. What kind of objects I am seeing when I am dreaming? Now, this can get a little bit complicated. We don't have to make it complicated. But just keep that at the back of your mind. So at one level, right now, this is the waking state. Night when I go to sleep and start dreaming, that's the dream state. Further along, if I go in a deep sleep state, that's yet another state. Okay. Now, but when I'm dreaming, in the dream also there is morning and night. In the dream also, I'm awake sometimes, and I dream sometimes, and I sleep sometimes. So this is how it gets complicated. So there is now the waking me experiencing this waking world. The dream me in the dream will be experiencing objects which appear tangible in the dream. So that would be the waking state in the dream. Don't sweat over this idea, but just keep in mind that when it is said that it is identified with the waking state, it means that in my perception, as long as objects appear as tangible to me, my body appears as tangible, then that is the waking state for me at that level. Next verse, 89. Bahyendriyaihi sthula padartha sevam srakchandanastriyadi vichitra roopam karoti jiva swayametadatmana tasmat prashastihi vapushosya jagare. It is through the body that the individual self experiences diverse tangible objects such as sandalwood and woman with the help of the external senses. The body, therefore, is vital in the waking state. The word sandalwood and woman often comes in many ancient Sanskrit texts. And as you can see, this is yet another example of how the presumed student, the presumed reader of the book was assumed to be a male. And this happened due to historical reasons, as many of us are aware, how because of several incursions from across the border, for more than 2,000 or 3,000 years, women had to be protected. We know in any war-like situation how women and children become the primary targets, and there is an effort to protect them. Right now, what's happening in Ukraine also, it's the men who have to stay back and fight. But a lot of effort is being made, not always successfully, but being made so that women and children are taken to a place of safety, that they are protected. And for that reason, the society, this kind of a distinction occurred. In the Vedic period, we read about how men and women, there was complete equality in terms of even receiving education or teaching. There was no distinction at all. But due to these historical reasons, the education, as we see through these books like this, got confined only to men. And that's why the books that were written during this period assumed that the reader, the student, will be male. And because of that assumption, you find phrases such as sandalwood and woman. So the idea is, so sandalwood and woman primarily really means that anything that attracts our senses. So the phrase here used is external senses. The Sanskrit is bahya indriya. Bahya means external. Indriya is the senses. As distinct from the mind, which is the inner sense, or antarindriya. Sometimes they use the word karana. Karana means an instrument. So the senses externally are called the bahya karanas. The body with all its organs are called bahya karana, external instruments. And the mind is called the internal instrument called antakarana. It is through the body that the individual self experiences diverse tangible objects with the help of the external senses. So that's the distinction. Senses and the mind being the internal. The body, therefore, is vital in the waking state. And I just explained why the body is necessary in order to have any kind of a waking experience. Even the waking experience in a dream, we still need a body. A dream body is needed to experience a dream ice cream. That's the idea. Verse 90. Sarvopi bahya samsaraha purushasya yadashrayah Vittideham sthulam grihavat grihamedhinaha. As a home is to a householder, recognize this body to be the tangible abode of a person's experience of the external world. The word abode, the word in Sanskrit here is griha. That's how the word grihastha comes in. Ones who makes the home as their dwelling place. So abode. So the body is the abode of all tangible experiences, the experiences in the external world. But this abode can also feel like a prison. The word Sanskrit word for prison is kara griha. So there is a griha, yes, it's an abode, but it's a prison house. So when the heart is filled with detachment, then this appears more like a prison house. One wants, that's what the identification is. One wants to be free from identifying just with this body. And the reason all those things were mentioned earlier about how disgusting the body is to generate that detachment. You see, just how the okay, let me try to express it this way. To a spiritual seeker who's trying to think of the Atman, the self, the body can appear like a prison house. I don't want to limit my consciousness, my identity, only to this body. But if someone has gotten used to this bondage, then the prison can appear as a home. So a home can appear as a prison to a spiritually awakened person, and a spiritually bound person, a person whom we normally say is worldly or materialistic, the prison can appear as a home. We know that sometimes when I've never been to a prison inside, so I haven't seen it, but seen it well in the movies and documentaries and read articles about it. So those who have been there with a life sentence, after some time, when they know that that's where the rest of their life is going to be spent, then that becomes kind of their home. The whole aspiration to be free from that just disappears. There was a friend of mine who had a bird at home, and it was a beautiful little cage, a parrot in India they had kept. And it's a sweet little bird. It had gotten so, I think at some point they became so confident that the bird won't fly away. So they would just keep the door of the cage open, and the bird would kind of slowly come out, and they would feed that bird with something, and the bird will sit there, look here and there, and then on its own, the bird could have easily flown away. There was just wide sky there. The bird didn't do that. He just quietly walked back inside that cage, prison house, in that cage. So that cage had become that bird's home. While life outside in this wide open world, under the sky, on the trees, either seemed impossible or may have been terrifying. And that can happen. That can happen to us. We get so used to living within this prison of this body that even when we are not fully satisfied with our present physical existence, either we become incapable of thinking anything beyond, or it could be just terrifying. That's why we just cling to the body as if that's all that we have. And an earlier verse which we saw last week, that clinging to the body and expecting to have this everlasting freedom is like wanting to cross a river, holding on to a crocodile, thinking it is a log of wood. Next verse. Sthulasya sambhava jara maranani dharmaha स्थौल्यादयो बहुविधा शिशुताद्यवस्थाः वर्णाश्रमादिनियमा बहुधा मया स्युः पूजावमान बहुमान mukha visheshaः. This body is subject to birth, aging and death, is prone to shapes like plumpness, has stages like childhood, is bound by rules related to different social classes and life's stages, is susceptible to diverse illnesses, and has experiences like praise, insult, and respect. This summarizes overall what this body is. And one may want to ask, who would want to get inside such a repetitive, boring, and limiting experience forever? Even if this body goes, we'll be born again in another body. Go through all of these things again. When that body goes, another body. Aren't we ever going to get bored? Won't we ever want to ask whether there is anything more, anything better than just going through this repetitive cycle? Those are the kind of questions we must hold into heart. So with this verse, the discussion on this gross body comes to an end. So next week we will begin with verse 92, which discusses the subtle body, the layer which is inside the gross body, the Sukshma Sharira. So we will stop here today. If you have any thoughts, comments, questions, this is the time to ask them. Okay. First, since ordinary people cannot burn off karma like enlightened, is the right attitude to be brave to face whatever karma comes our way, knowing that God is giving us what will bring us closer to Him? So, since ordinary people cannot burn off karma like the enlightened, this statement really is not very accurate. It's not that the enlightened people burn off karma easily. It is that ordinary people who are able to burn off their karma become enlightened. So before enlightenment, everyone is unenlightened. And according to Vedanta, there is no such thing as ordinary people and extraordinary people. As far as the potentiality is concerned, every one of us has the same potential to become enlightened. Now, whether we use that potential fully or not, that is up to us. Swami Vivekananda had this beautiful poem called "No One But Me to Blame." So, we have this great opportunity. How much proper use I make of that opportunity is up to me. If I don't do it as well as I should, there is no one but me to blame. So, none of us is ordinary in that sense. Every one of us is a child of God. Every one of us is unique, and every one of us can become enlightened if we really want to. Is the right attitude to be brave to face whatever karma comes? Actually, we really don't have much choice. It's not as if karma is going to say, well, are you brave enough to do it? Otherwise, I won't come. It doesn't work that way. So, whether I'm brave or not, what will happen. So, whether to experience the ups and downs in life in a positive, constructive, wise way, or to just do it in a kind of a very, kicking and screaming, as they say, then we just compound our suffering if we are unwilling to face the inevitable. So if we focus on attaining the goal or the ideal without getting too distracted by the inevitable ups and downs in life, then we have some chance of reaching the goal. Otherwise, all of our life can be like a constant firefight, constantly trying to put out the fires even when we always can't do it. And this is never going to end. So best way is to, in spite of all the turmoil going on within and without, to kind of never lose sight of the goal itself. Next. Identification is a strong feeling with body sheath. Can we break identification with body karma? Can you comment more on how to identify with Atman, pure consciousness? In theory, it's actually pretty simple. To remind ourselves as often as we can that I am the Atman. To remind ourselves as often as we can that I am more than just this body and mind. Not to deny the presence of the body and mind. Yes, there is the body, there is the mind. But they are not me. Just as I don't have to deny the presence of my clothes. Yes, I see the clothes, they are there, but they are not me. So I can use my body well, I can use my mind well, the way I use my computer well, the way I try to take good care of my car, my home. All of those things are fine, so long as I don't attach the label of either I or mine to them. Make use of everything in the world. Enjoy everything in the world. Just don't put the label of I or mine to any of this. Because every time we connect anything as I or anything as mine, we are opening up the possibility of some kind of present or future suffering. Next. Are there similar texts written by women sages in the Vedic era? I assume that the content and intent are the same regardless of who wrote it. Well, there are mentions of women sages in the Upanishad called Gargi, Maitreyi, and so on, who took part in these very profoundly philosophical discussions. Coming down to the later centuries, there have been great women saints who have musical compositions, even books, several of them. And yes, as far as the content is concerned, there is not any great difference, because ultimately, whether it's written by men or women, what they are writing about is the truth that transcends gender. The Atman is neither male nor female. God is neither male nor female. We may refer to God as our father, our mother, but ultimately, in the absolute sense, God is beyond gender, beyond time, beyond space. Next, in a being that is not yet enlightened, when the body dies, there is still pending karma which causes the rebirth. So why did the body not continue experiencing those remaining karma phala? What determines the longevity of the body? Good question. In terms of gardening, sometimes they say that even if you have, let's say, a bunch of seeds you want to go and plant into your garden. Now, all the seeds will not germinate at the same time. Some seeds will I don't know the technical term behind it, but you'll see that some seeds are ready for planting, some seeds you have to wait, some seeds take a longer time for the plant to grow. So the karma seeds are also like that. And so what happens is that we always have a lot of karma in our karma store, if you like, our own karma bank, our own karma account. It's not like some place where everything is right here, right now. All of our karma is right here. But a little of that karma kind of comes up on the surface and says, I'm ready to bear fruit. So that portion of the karma which is ready to bear fruit, the Sanskrit word for that is called prarabdha. Arabdha means beginning. That which is ready to begin giving its results. So those seeds become my karma dollars for my vacation into this birth. And so none of us knows how much of those prarabdha we are born with. So someone has a huge number of seeds in that prarabdha, they have a longer lifespan. Some of them come up with a very little bit of it, and they have a shorter lifespan. So our original karma account is always much larger. Now, who determines how many of these seeds will be ready for giving result? That's just the way nature functions. It's not determined by any specific person or any other rule, other than it just happens. So that's why the Gita says, Gahana karmano gatihi. Inscrutable are the ways of karma. Which, in other words, karma is a theory. All that we know about karma is a good karma will lead to a happy result, a bad karma will lead to a painful result. That's about it. Exactly which karma will produce what result, we may not always know. How many karmas will be ready to bear fruit at the beginning of a life? Nobody knows. And because of that, none of us knows how anyone is going to, how long anyone is going to live. We have no idea because we don't know how much of the prarabdha karma we have. Next, would objectifying our sense impressions, such as taste, be a practice towards diminishing body consciousness? I think experiencing our sense impressions becomes possible only after objectification. Because only if something is objectified there can be some activity connected with it, whether it is tasting or seeing or smelling. So an objectification has already occurred. So all that we can say is objectification in the sense that instead of saying I'm experiencing it, you can say this is what the body is experiencing it, or the mind is experiencing it. You don't have to say it really, but kind of know it deeply inside the heart. Sometimes some people do it. There was a monk who had gone once to Dakshineshwar and stayed there for some days at the time of Sri Ramakrishna. And he would never refer to his body as me, obviously, but not even as my body. He would just refer to this as this. This is hungry. This is wanted. And Sri Ramakrishna was so childlike. He was quite impressed by that. He said, oh, he's such a great jnani. He's referring to the body as this. That would be the kind of an objectification of the body. And so, Sri Ramakrishna also then said, this is hungry. He started using this. Then his disciple, that Mathur Babu, who was also the manager of the temple, he with folded hands, he told Sri Ramakrishna, Baba, you don't need to say all this. You don't have any body consciousness. So that's why I said it's not about saying, because now if you go about speaking this kind of language in front of your friends, you're like, oh, this is hungry now. They will think something has gone wrong here. So use normal language. Just as they say, when in Rome, do as the Romans do. Externally. Internally, tell yourself that's not you. Even when you're eating food, externally, everyone will see that you are just eating food the way everyone is eating. But internally, you have to be aware of the fact that this food is a material part of this universe. This body is also a material part of the universe. So keeping that, objectifying in that sense as an inner awareness is of course very helpful. Yes. Will remembering our Atman identity burn away the Panchikarana? Or burn away the karma, I think you mean there. Well, remembering the Atman identity really is a practice. What it will generate is knowledge ultimately. And it's this knowledge that I'm not the body, I'm not the mind, is what will burn off the karma. Now, when we just kind of to put it in a little bit clearer context, what does burning of karma mean? I mean, we have certain idea about what burning means. Now, karma is not like some kind of a paper or fuel that you just kind of light fire to it and it burns. So what does burning karma mean? It simply means this. Karma is action. To do the action or to experience the results of action, you need a doer or you need an experiencer. So the agent of action, the one who does action, in Sanskrit is called karta. Karta is one who does karma. Experiencing the results of action, whether it's joy or sorrow, the experiencer is called bhokta. So karta and bhokta, the agent of action and the experiencer of the result of action. To do action, you have to have the sense of agency. To experience joy and sorrow, you have to have that agency of experiencing. You have to feel, I am enjoying this or I am suffering. Now, what does enlightenment mean? What does knowing I am the Atman mean? When I say I am the Atman, not just say it again. When I say, when I experience I am the Atman, in effect, what I am really meaning is that I am not the body. I am not the mind. And all activity is present in the body or the mind. There is no activity in the Atman. All experiencing the results of karma are present also in the body and mind, not in the Atman. Even before we experience our oneness with the Atman, already, even today, even in our present state, we spend at least a few minutes in a 24-hour cycle when we are not identified either with the body and mind. That's the state of deep sleep, sushupti. So in that state of deep sleep, there is no joy or sorrow. We are not doing any action in deep sleep. We are not experiencing the result of any action in deep sleep because we are disconnected from the body and mind. No identification with the body and mind. Now, if I can do that consciously, if I'm not identified with the body and mind, there'll be no agency of action, there'll be no experiencer of the results of action. That is what burning the karma means. If there is no doer of karma, if there is no experiencer, then how can karma exist? So there is this triad. There is the subject, there is the object, and there is the action that connects the subject with the object. So in order for karma to exist, there has to be someone doing the karma or someone experiencing the result of karma. When this thing is gone, this thing just can't survive. That is what is meant by karma being burnt off. Next, if a gross body is a means to lead us to self-realization, then why the description of this body is to put us off? Gross body is a means in the sense that we need a body to help us do the practice which will tell us we are not the body. So it is a kind of a self-destructive means, if you like. And the description of the body that is given in a verse 86 is to generate that vairagya, generate that detachment. Because if I'm not detached from the body, if I'm attached to the body, if I cling to the body, then it no longer becomes a means to self-realization. The body will become a means to self-realization only if it is accompanied with detachment. And in order to produce that detachment, we have the kind of description that we read today. Next, how is the mind different from the Atman? Totally different. The body is different from the Atman, the mind is different from the Atman. Both body and mind are material things. Both the body and mind change. Both the body and mind eventually perish. The Atman is unchangeable, non-perishable, non-material. The body and mind have a beginning, they have an end. The Atman has no beginning and no end. So the body and the mind are completely different from the Atman, as different as light is from darkness. Next, will neti on all these not being self result in God realization? Yes. If neti is practiced consistently, not part-time. Part-time neti doesn't work. Because it's a little bit like if I want to go someplace and I say I take 3 steps ahead and 5 steps back, I'm never going to reach that place. So doing neti for a few minutes and the opposite for the rest of the day, not much helpful. It can give a little bit of satisfaction, but if you want that neti to lead to enlightenment, then that neti, for that matter, any kind of a spiritual practice must kind of become a part of me. Even japa, ultimately. It's not just about how much japa I do in the morning and evening. Yes, that's a good beginning. And doing it with regularity, with faith, with devotion, with sincerity is definitely helpful. But eventually, what that japa should do is that it should continue. Not necessarily, you're not expected to sit in a place for 24 hours and say your mantra. But even saying that mantra with such intensity, even for a short time, should keep that rhythm going on throughout the day, unbroken. It'll happen. It may not happen right in the beginning, but that's the ideal. It's a little bit like when sometimes musicians understand this well. If there is a certain tune or a certain raga or a certain melody that you hear early in the morning, and if you have a good musical sense, and if it kind of goes deep inside, you will see that throughout the day, you might be busy with 100 other things, but at some level, that early morning melody that you have heard will somehow be going on inside. That's how we want, whether it is neti neti or your mantra or whatever, something that connects us to that higher reality at a much subtler level, irrespective of whatever is going on around us or within us. That's the idea. Next, my father believed that we bear the guna and papa of our ancestors. How does this fit with our karma? It doesn't fit. According to the karma theory, everyone carries the burden of their own karma. We don't carry the burden of our ancestors. Yeah, there could be other theories about this, but as far as the karma theory is concerned, we don't carry anyone else's karma. We are responsible only for our own karma. Next. Okay, so that we come to the end of your questions. Keep the questions and comments coming. It really helps clarify some of the points that come up in the course of the conversation, and keep thinking about it. More questions will come, which is good. Try as far as possible to figure out the answers yourself. You will see that the answers will eventually come, either during the course of the conversation now or during the study of this book as we go further. Om Jananim Saradam Devim Ramakrishnam Jagadgurum Padapadme Tayo Shritva Pranamami Muhurmuhu. So on Sunday, our subject will be Lessons from Sri Chaitanya. That is for the Sunday satsang, and next Wednesday we will continue with the study of the Vivekachudamani. So let's conclude with a prayer now. May the Divine Being, who is the Father in heaven of the Christians, Holy One of the Jewish faith, Allah of the Muslims, Buddha of the Buddhists, Tao of the Taoists, Ahura Mazda of the Zoroastrians, the Great Spirit of the Native Americans, and Brahman of the Hindus, lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May we be granted strength, freedom, and clear understanding. May we learn to see God in our own hearts and in everyone around us. May God bless us all and fill our hearts with gratitude, grace, and love. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all.